Hi everyone, welcome back to CAT125R. This week we are into Unit 6 and you are hard at work on your expertise speeches, so we will be discussing developing graphicacy. You've already been thinking a lot about ethos in this course, particularly as it's related to the personal statement. In that assignment, however, you were limited to establishing your ethos through text. With the expertise speech, you have the opportunity to establish your ethos visually as well as textually through your use of automatically advancing slides. This opportunity comes with some new challenges as well, however, and we'll be helping you navigate those challenges this week. You'll hear from Angela Kim, who will teach us about the relationship between visual strategies and rhetorical ethos, or as she puts it in the lecture video, how graphicacy becomes the interface, the representation of your logos, ethos, and pathos. You'll also view an interview from Professor Scott Klemmer, who's an expert in interface design and human-computer interaction. In this unit, we'll be introducing some of the principles of graphicacy, including typography, composition, color theory, and digital standards. Just kidding, of course. I wouldn't actually use a Comic Sans slide in one of our lecture videos. As Danielle DeVos says in your reading for this week, letter forms carry with them conventions and provide readers with important cues. The conventions suggested by Comic Sans and the cues it provides the reader are not really in line with the typical expectations for an academic presentation. This week, I want to get you thinking about the Ignite speech and some particular methods for introducing the speech to your audience. So here are some objectives for your Ignite speech introductions. You want to get the attention and interest of your audience. You want to reveal the topic of your speech. You want to establish your credibility and goodwill. And you want to preview the body of your speech. So we're going to take a look at some previous CAT125R student samples in order to think about how you can achieve some of these objectives visually. So with the first point, or the first objective for introducing your Ignite speech is to get the attention and interest of your audience. Some ways to do that include relating the topic to your audience, stating the importance of the topic, arousing the curiosity of your audience, questioning them, or maybe telling a story. So let's take a look at this sample from a previous student. This was the first slide of this student's presentation, this rather ominous looking slide that says, "What is this silent killer?" An important thing, though, with a slide like this one is that you want to quickly reveal the actual topic of the speech. So don't get so caught up in gaining your audience's attention that you forget to clearly state what it is you're talking about. So while this student started with this sort of dramatic introduction, the presentation was immediately followed up with this slide, in which the student revealed that the topic of this presentation was the health dangers of prolonged periods of sitting. You also want to establish your credibility in the introduction of your speech. So here's a sample from a student who established her credibility for a speech on how to pick a restaurant with a group of friends by using her second slide in her speech. Here we have pictures of her in various locations where she's dined around the world, as well as the logo from the blog where she works as a restaurant reviewer. Here's another series of slides from a presentation on temporary dorm room decoration ideas. This student established his credibility with photos of projects he had completed. A photo of his own room, an image of him painting a mural in a friend's room, and a sort of prank-style decoration idea he had where he decorated a friend's room with bags of pop chips. Another way to establish your credibility is to cite your sources. So even though you are not writing, your audience won't be reading the textual citations of your speech, you still want to signal when you are using someone else's ideas. So you can use signal phrases when you speak, something like according to, or a recent study conducted at UCSD concluded. But as we're talking about graphicacy this week, you can also use the visual medium of your slides to explain where your source material comes from. So this is going back to the student who was talking about the dangers of prolonged sitting. So a big source for this student was a study out of the Mayo Clinic. So he included a slide as he was introducing this study with the logo of the Mayo Clinic. And he also included this screen grab from a academic database, PubMed, that shows the original research article that he's citing. So he doesn't expect the audience to read all of this material, right? Here, this screen grab is acting itself as a sort of visual aid to indicate to the audience that that the material he's discussing is coming from this particular academic research. Now, we're talking a lot here about some of the positive benefits of giving a presentation with PowerPoint slides, but you also want to think about some of the pitfalls that using PowerPoint can open up to you as a speaker. So this is a piece from Ian Parker called Absolute PowerPoint. And he writes, "The usual metaphor for everyday software is the tool, but that doesn't seem to be right here. PowerPoint is more like a suit of clothes or a car or plastic surgery. You take it out with you. You are judged by it. You insist on being judged by it." So in talking about PowerPoint as a suit of clothes or car or plastic surgery, right, we're talking about the ways that you are projecting yourself to your audience visually. And there are some common difficulties that PowerPoint can create in this regard. So PowerPoint, as you know, has several pre-designed templates. You may want to use these for your presentation, and it may be perfectly reasonable for the context of your presentation and your topic. But you want to make sure that you're selecting one that's in keeping with the context of your speech and in keeping with your ethos. So while an ornate template like this one probably doesn't make sense rhetorically with something like an end of quarter budget report, it might work well for a presentation on building a family photo album or something with a romantic bent, like how to plan a wedding inexpensively, right? So you want to make sure that if you're using these templates, you're not just using them because you think they're pretty or you like the way it looks, that it needs to be part of the entire rhetorical context of your presentation. Another thing you want to think really carefully about is using any kind of clip art. So if you are using stock images, these are images that exist pre-existing on the web, you want to be cautious about your use of these. They typically can make a presentation feel a bit generic. Again, if you are using one of these images, you want to make sure it makes sense within the context of your presentation. The best option is to generate your own images, especially since these are your areas of expertise. So if you already have images related to the topic that you've taken, or you can certainly create them for the presentation. You also want to make sure that you're making your slides as clear and readable as possible. So using hard to read fonts is something, of course, you would caution against. So keeping all of these ideas about graphicacy and the Ignite style speech in mind, here are some final pointers on what effective Ignite style PowerPoint slides will do. They'll complement or extend the speaker's point. So you want to make sure that the slides are in keeping with what you're saying or perhaps building on what you're saying in some way. They're not going to compete for the audience's attention. So when a slide is visible to the audience for such a brief amount of time as it is with the Ignite style speech, you want to make sure that the audience isn't distracted by trying to read a lot of text on the slide or by some kind of flashing image that's distracting from what it is you're saying as a speaker. In keeping with this idea, they're going to rely more on images than on text. And I think you'll see that if you think back to the Ignite style speeches you watched for the Piazza Post, where you did the rhetorical analysis of 3 different speeches. Right? Those slides were primarily image-based. Any text that was on them was very sparse and really only intended to perhaps clarify the image. So you have a lot of material ahead of you this week as you're preparing your slides and preparing your presentation. I know this is a challenging assignment, but I think it's a really rewarding one, and I think you and your section mates will enjoy viewing one another's speeches. Have a great week.